I'm Trevor Hiatt. I've been retired for many years, had a lot of spare hours. Some of those hours I used trying to write some poetry. I don't know how good it is, but it was fun. My granddaughters stole it and made a book. Now I'm here to read those poems, to put them on a disc. This is the book. And I'm gonna try to read the poems. There is no organization here. There are not many order. They're just in the book. So we'll start with number one, which is the spanking. And it's not necessarily true, maybe a little bit. Growing up, I was a normal child, mostly good, maybe a little wild. If I strayed and did something bad, Mom would scold and then tell Dad. When Dad came home and got the news, he took me aside to give me his views. Now, very seldom, if ever, did I agree with what he said he was going to do to me. It seemed his favorite form of punishment, and not just a small admonishment, but for my wayward hanky-panky, after supper, I was going to get a spanking. Oh, how I really hated to hear that. He had big hands and a terrible pat, and waiting for Mom to cook supper was a great big downer of not an upper. After what seemed like a very long time, Mom finally put supper out for us to dine. When he had finished, Dad took me aside, told me it was time to tan my hide. Very often he would fake and then decide. This time he would let the spanking slide. But sometimes he would follow through and give me what he promised he would do. Now, he never really hurt my bottom end. There were no marks or scars to mend. It was just my pride that took the blow, and I think that's why Dad put on the show. My father was a kindly gentleman who wanted his kids to follow his plan. And the promise of a spanking sometimes later sure made me an anxious waiter. The next poem is a poem I wrote for my funeral. But it's here and I'll read it. It's called Please Don't Cry for Me. Please don't cry for me. Weep for all those left behind. I'm simply going home. Just keep me in your mind. Please don't cry for me. It's to a better place I go. With faith in God's promise, I'm leaving this world of woe. Please don't cry for me. Wrapped in God's warm love, I'll be with those gone before, to spend eternity with Him above. My faith is strong, and I've been assured that very soon I'll be a forgiven sinner in paradise. Please don't cry for me. And this is just a little silly thing I wrote, I don't know why, called The Hunt. Now, Dad blamed it. Where is that thing? I put it right here yesterday. She must have moved it again. Maybe it's under that. Nope, must be somewhere else. I just don't understand where the dickens it's at. Well, it must be on that shelf. I'll bet that's where it is. No, it isn't here. Oh, I think it's in that drawer. No luck here either. Crap. I give up. Now I forget what I'm looking for. And here's a kind of a serious one. I don't know about this. I was trying to make a point. I don't know whether I did or not. You'll have to decide. It's called the onion fields. When I was young, in the onion fields I'd toil, pulling weeds and loosening soil. The pay was short, the hours long, working on hands and knees till the sun was gone. As I look back and reminisce, it seems to me our minds, like those onion fields might be, with hardened soil and full of weeds, waiting for us to toil and plant the seeds. The onion fields had many kinds of weeds, dandelions and thistles bursting with seeds. Our minds too may be infested and require vigilance to be sure we pull all the weeds with diligence. We pull the weeds in the onion fields so the crop can grow to its biggest yields. Our minds also has a crop to grow, and that crop is each of us, don't you know. The weeds in our minds are varied and many, and to reach our best, we don't want any. There's lying and cheating, lust and greed. Each of these and more is an unwanted weed. Like the onion in a well-tilled field that grows and gives us all it can yield, if we keep our minds free of weeds and tilled, we'll reach life's end fulfilled. This is the last poem I ever wrote. It's a little longer, and it's called The Veteran. There's a man who lives in our town, tall man, gaunt and slim. No one really knows his name, but we all just call him Jim. He's a little bent, has a slow gait, has fingers missing from one hand. A long red scar runs down his cheek like a bright burning brand. He's a friendly sort of a man, always ready to stop and chat, but never talks about himself. It seems anything other than that. Jim lives in a big old house on the poor side of town by the track. It needs a whole lot of loving care. The place is really a shack. One day as I walked to the bicycle shop, where my bike was in for repair, I had to pass by Jim's place, and he was standing there. He smiled and waved, and I replied, and then, as if I was a friend of long ago, he invited me in to visit a while. Said he just made a fresh pot of joe. With some misgiving, I accepted his offer and followed him inside with anticipation. And after just a little while, I began to feel guilty for any hesitation. We sat at a table, and Jim poured the joe, and I certainly learned joe is coffee in Navy speak. As we sat, we chatted about many things, a lot of which was tongue-in-cheek. Then, as we sat chatting and drinking joe, I noticed a small cabinet on the wall. I looked closer, and to my surprise, saw military medals with ribbons and all. I asked Jim if they belonged to him, and in a low breath, he gladly said yes, and he quickly went on to something else, as if it troubled him somehow to confess. I don't know much about these things, but one medal gave me a start. There in the center of the display was our nation's Purple Heart. We finished our joe, and I said goodbye, and Jim said, "Come back soon now." And as I left, I looked at him, and he looked so different somehow. took a trip west one time with my mother and father, and we were at Yellowstone Park, staying in a lodge, and an old gentleman told my dad this story. And I came home and I thought it deserved a little more than that. I wrote this poem. I called it Jacob and Rebecca. He didn't have any names, he was simply talking in generalities. Many years ago in the faraway West, Jacob and Rebecca were man and spouse. They lived on a small farm outside of town where Jacob had built a one-room house. They wed in winter and it was very cold. Their little house was hard to heat. Fuel for the stove was really scarce. The only thing they had to burn was peat. About midway through the winter, Rebecca took sick and passed away, and left Jacob to carry on alone. He had no place to go, he had to stay. Many friends came to the little house to see Jacob and say how sorry they were. They said it was sad, for she was so young, everyone would miss her, they were sure. Jacob agreed she was a very fine wife, and he'd never find another. He'd hoped for a long life together, and maybe someday she'd become a mother. But he said he never knew her very well. The only times they'd chanced to meet, she was coming out with a bucket of ash, and he was going in with a bucket of peat. The next poem is one called How Do You Tell, and this was an early poem I wrote about a man who was just a man, nothing important about him, but I went to his wake, and it was the most people I ever saw at a wake, and it made a terrible impression on me. I couldn't imagine why so many people would be there. But I wrote this poem called How Do You Tell? How do you measure success in life? How do you know if you won or lost? Is it how you bear your grief and strife? Or is it how much your possessions cost? Is it how much power you wield over those less fortunate than you? Or how you can be counted on to yield when asked to help those down and blue? For so long it's been a mystery to me how the world will judge me in the end. But now it's clear, and I'm sure I see. It's how many around me call me friend. And the next poem is a little silly one, really. I used to shoot a lot of skeet. And this is a poem about skeet shooters called Old Skeet Shooters. Old skeet shooters never quit. They just blast away. They're out there firing night and day. It doesn't matter if it's wet or dry, cold or hot, they're always out there taking a shot. To be a good skeet shooter, he has to learn finding reasons to skip the chores is his concern. There are very few days that are fit to work. Certainly it's not that he really wants to shirk. What? Paint the house? Don't you know it's going to rain? See that little cloud? To start that would be insane. But by golly, since I've got nothing else to do, I think I'll just go out and shoot around or two. Oh, I know the grass is tall, but it's way too hot to mow. I'll just wait a few days and let it grow. If anyone should come around looking for me, Tell him I'm out there trying to break 23. Wow, would you look at that snow getting so high? Someone needs to shovel, and I'll get to it by and by. I just don't have time to bother with it now. I'm going to shoot some skeet. Going to show them how. All skeet shooters have a dream. To make 100 straight is their scheme. Some of them do, some of them don't. But it don't matter. Give up the game, they won't. Oh, this next poem is long and probably maybe the most important I ever did. We had I guess a cousin that lived with us when we were kids, my brothers and I. Name was Dooney. And Dooney and his mother lived with us for a while. And Dooney didn't have very much. And so this is about old Dooney's bike. Old Dooney's bike. It was the summer of 37, I think. Well, maybe it was 38. So many years have come and gone, it's hard to rightly recollect the date. There wasn't a lot for city kids to do but hanging around the corner and spit. We played kick the can and duck on a rock, but riding our bikes was our favorite. Most of us had bikes of some description. Some were old, terrible-looking things, but some were nearly new and clean. There were even a couple of fancy Silver Kings. Now old Doon didn't have a bike to ride, so he most often got left behind. He decided he had to fix that problem and would have to see what he could find. He went to old man Wrigley's junkyard to look for wheels and pedals and the like, and there among the many cast-offs he found the beginnings of a bike. He put the parts he found together, but he found he was a little shy, so he hunted round the neighborhood day and night on the slide. He traded, bought, and borrowed from friends and strangers too, until he had the parts to build a bike that he felt would surely do. The time finally came to test the bike he had accumulated with so much pride. He wheeled it out for all the world to see and announced he was about to take a ride. We were all surprised when we saw that bike. Nothing fit, and it was out of square. It was about the ugliest thing we'd seen. But it did seem like all the parts were there. He headed up the 4th Street hill where we tested all such kinds of things. He started up the grade pushing his new creation, feeling sure he'd come down as if on wings. He reached the top and turned the bike around, strutted the old tattered seat, grabbed the rusty handlebars, and was prepared for the long-awaited feat. As he aimed his bike down that big old hill, he heard a lot of cheering from the crowd that had come from all around the neighborhood to watch him test his bike. He was very proud. Then old Doon started down the hill. He wasn't waiting anymore. He was standing up upon it. It seemed he was about to soar. He was about halfway down the run and moving like the speed of sound when the front wheel came off the bike and they never had been crowned. Old Doon and the rest of the bike finished the trip down the hill, over and under and all tangled up. A terrible wreck, talked about still. Except for the missing front wheel, the bike looked about like it did before. It survived the crash pretty well, but old Doon didn't. He was really sore. There were no broken bones or bloody cuts, but a lot of old Doon's skin had taken leave, and he had so many black and blue spots You'd have to see them to believe. Now that bite just disappeared. No one cared about that ugly thing. Old and healed and went to school, and for his birthday got a silver king. And I'm getting kind of, I don't know what you call it here. This is called afraid. Talking about dying, I guess it has something with what to do with my age. Afraid. Are you afraid to die? He asked. Certainly I'm not afraid, he said. But secretly I began to wonder, will I feel the same on my deathbed? We began the journey to life's end when we leave our mother's womb. And the fate that lies ahead for all of us is sure and certain, waiting in the tomb. There is no escape, we must all die. It's as natural as taking a breath. We are all given some time to live, but there at the end waits death. Why then must we be afraid to die? It's the most natural of all things. It's not the ritual of death we fear, but what any life after passing brings. So after all, I must admit I am afraid. I'm afraid of what lies in the unknown. But my faith is stronger than my fear. And I believe God's mercy will be shown. The next poem is, I think, the one I like the best of anything that I ever wrote. It means more to me. It's called These Hands. These hands are not mine. They belong to God. He loaned them to me when I was born. They've served me well for all these years. Now they're old, wrinkled, scarred, and worn. When he gave them to me, he attached no rules. They were mine to do with as I would. But he surely had a plan in mind that I would always use these hands for good. Without doubt I failed in many ways and used them for things not pleasing in his sight. But it's my hope that when his judgment comes, he'll see less wrong than right. Now the time is near to give them back, and I hope he'll peer with a pleasant nod, and know that I most always knew these hands are not mine, they belong to God. This next poem is kind of I kind of enjoy this. I enjoyed doing it. My wife and I took a trip on our 50th wedding anniversary, and we stayed 3 or 4 days at Gettysburg. And I used to be a Civil War buff. I enjoyed reading about the Civil War, and we stayed in a motel at the base of Cemetery Ridge. And on Sunday evening, Margaret said, you know, I'm tired, I'm going to just take a bath, put my gown on, and rest. And I said, well, I believe I'll take a walk. And so I did. I walked up on the hill to the cemetery. This is where Lincoln gave his Gettysburg address. I called it a walk on the hill. On a warm and quiet Sunday evening, I walked along the lonely hill at Gettysburg, where Lincoln spoke the brief words that echo still. I paused among the graves of those brave men who gave their lives in the terrible fury that swirled about that pleasant place and ended forever their work and worry. What must have been their thoughts when they saw the hordes advancing? Did they think of hearth and home, or perhaps some young love romancing? While still thinking myriad thoughts of the awful war that laid those men to rest, my attention was drawn toward the ridge across the wheat fields to the west. The sun had disappeared below the ridge, from whence the rebels came so bold, and the sky, more beautiful than before, had changed from blue to red and gold. As I stood entranced by the striking view, a distant church bell broke the still. It added to the spell which had me held, and explain what happened next, I never will. There was no other person near. I was standing alone on the knoll, and felt compelled to ask, perhaps aloud, from whom does that bell toll? Then I thought I heard a gentle voice, speaking as I have never been spoken to. Oh man, do you really not know? The bell you hear tolls for you. Slowly I walked down the darkening slope, leaving the dead to sleep their sleep, knowing that I had just been given another precious memory to keep. Oh, this is just nonsense. I'm not sure I even ought to keep it, but it's here, and I'll read it. It's called The Mystery of the Outhouse. Poets have written millions of words about the lowly outhouse, I guess, and most of what they have to say I agree with, I confess. They write about cold in winter, or about the awful summer heat. They write about how bad it was to sit on that hard, rough seat. They talk about flies and bees, and about the dark they always tell, and almost always they speak about the overwhelming smell. But there is one big mystery about which they never extol. I wonder why some outhouses have seats with more than one hole. Most common was 2 holes, but some had even more. I think maybe I've seen some with as many as 4. Now why in the world did they need to have those extra spaces? They couldn't use but one at a time, and they simply wasted the other places. I've thought about this for a very long time, and I think I have the answer complete. It has to be one of 2 reasons why they put extra holes in the seat. Maybe it was so they could brag about having more holes in their house out back than any other their neighbors could claim. Sort of like owning a big fancy Cadillac. But I think the real reason for multiple holes is that some folks simply don't like to sit on a seat after some fellow with a bad aim has missed the hole, leaving one seat wet. And then here's a little something that people like me might enjoy, meaning old people. This is called Life Begins at 40, which is nonsense. Life begins at 40, I've heard it said. But what I want to know is who said it. Whoever did was touched in the head. He didn't know, he only read it. He might be right in a way, I guess. Life does seem to start anew, but perhaps he thought there'd be less stress. What really happens, he had no clue. One day you're feeling a little ill, and you go to seek a doctor's advice. He says, here, go get this pill. Take it once a day, or maybe twice. And he says, come back in 30 days, if you're able. I would like to check the pressure out. Well, he said, pressure's fine and stable, but there's sugars and doubt. And he says, here, go get this pill. Take it once a day or maybe twice. Now you're taking 2 a day and always will. Remember before 40? Wasn't that really nice? Then you get a cold or maybe a little chill. Back to the top you go, and he's very precise. He says, I want you to go get a pill. Take it once a day, or maybe twice. That's how it goes from 40 on. It's to the doctor, hospital or drugstore. It's a full-time job, a regular marathon. It goes on and on till it becomes a war. Now you're way past 40 and it just makes you see. You take 18 pills a day and that's not all. You wear glasses, hearing aids, store teeth, put it all together and you simply want a ball. You've had hernias, heart troubles and gallstones, had 6 or 8 operations and 2 pacemakers installed. And with all the bumps and bruises and broken bones, sometimes you wonder if life is what it's called. I hope the guy that says 40 is life's beginning will have a chance to read this simple story. He may perhaps change his present thinking and realize that life after 40 is not all glory. This next poem will mean something to anybody who knows anything about the Masonic Lodge. In the Masonic Lodge, the Blue Lodge is separated into 3 degrees. The second degree is called the Fellowcraft degree. And there is a lecture, a long, long lecture. Included in that lecture is a description of the 5 senses of human nature. And this poem is called A Fellowcraft Speaks to God. Lord, the sun is coming up. Thank you for letting me stay to see the wondrous sight and start another day, and hear the robin gaily singing as she greets the rising sun. She's happy with her fate to feed her nest of hungry young. Yes, Lord, I feel the gentle breeze, like your hand across my face. Oh, you have so many ways to let us know you're every place. The scent of flowers on the air, the smell of new mown hay, are special gifts from you for us to enjoy along the way. And who of us has never known, after toiling in the midday sun, the taste of clear, cool water to help us get our labors done? Thank you, Lord, for giving us the senses that we need to smell and taste and feel and hear, and best of all, to see. And then there's reincarnation. I suppose guys like me think about that a little bit more than maybe younger people. That's what this is about. What would you be in your next life, I asked. Without a pause, the answer came. To be a respected doctor would be my task, and be the best to ever play the game. Some folks say they think they would choose to be a lawyer, a banker, or maybe president. One lad chose to tend the bar and serve the booze, and would lead a life of fun and games hell-bent. As for me, I think I would make a different choice. I would choose to come back and be a man, just a plain and simple man, living free with a voice, to express my thoughts and without fear take a stand. My wish would be to live free and do it my way, blaming no one but myself if I get in a jam. to enjoy life, to worship, to work and play. I mean, I would simply like to be what I am. I had a beautiful dog named Belle, and she died and broke my heart. So I wrote a poem about Belle. I had her for 13 years. She was a Sheltie, and she was my friend. So I called the poem my friend. Everyone needs a special friend to be by their side to the very end. A friend who will not betray the bond that holds them every day. I am one of the very fortunate few to have such a special friend. Are you? My friend is always posted quietly by, ready to comfort me and not ask why. Expensive jewels are not her friend. She could care less for all that bling. Fine designer clothes are not for her, and she never asks for silk or fur. Our evenings out don't cost a lot, maybe around our little plot, and her taste for food is a simple thing. Just whatever we have will be satisfied. My friend's name is Annabelle Lee. She's a Shetland sheepdog, true as can be. Her eyes are brown and her hair is nearly red. She's a true blue friend, born and bred. And this is a wish for Dee, Danny's wife, my brother's wife. I think she had an operation, and I wrote this poem for her called A Wish for Dee. This ain't no fancy Hallmark card. It's just a plain old paper note. But don't you know I worked awful hard to get that done computer to print what I wrote? No help could I get from those quick nerds. Hell, they don't know how to spell. And if they did, they wouldn't know the words to say the things I want to tell. I searched in hardscrabble and Swayze, but the selection wasn't very much. In fact, those folks seemed a little hazy when I asked for fancy cards and such. So I guess it's up to old Marg and me to figure out what in the world to say. So here it is. Our wish for you, Dee. Have the greatest and happiest birthday. It wasn't for her operation, it was for her birthday. I got that mixed up. This one is about my mother. My mother died when I was 4 years old. Never knew her, and I have no memories of my mother. But I've thought about her many times. And this is about her, and I call it Mary. Mary, you left this world too soon. You had so much life left to live. You never really had a chance to give all the good you had to give. I didn't understand who you were. I was just too young to know. But I hope you knew who I was before cruel fate said you had to go. Through the years, you were forgotten. No one left to mourn your leaving. Time passes, our memories grow dim, and we soon forget our grieving. But after all these years, I grieve for those things lost that never were. I grieve for you, my mother, Mary, but someday we'll meet in heaven, I'm sure. I don't even know whether I should read this. We lost our only son when he was 28 years old. He drowned. He went swimming in a stone quarry on a very hot night outside of Chicago. He lived in Chicago, by the way. And no one knows what the problem was. I talked to the coroner. There was no drugs or alcohol or bruises. Probably cramps, he said. But at the funeral, before the funeral started, I went in the office and wrote these lines, and the preacher read them. And I called it to Terry. His name was Terry. A young man left the other day to show the world he could do it his way. Turning his back on family and friends, he wandered a world of roads with dead ends. Today he's back where he ought to be. Welcome home, son. Welcome home, T. Now this one is probably the most serious thing I've ever written. And I probably tried the hardest, and I'm not even sure it belongs in here. But it's about my niece, Trevor Hiatt. Her daddy told me that this did belong in here, so I'm going to read it. Her life was like a gathering storm. It began on a bright, clear day, with not a single cloud to blur the sky, or even a hint of the coming gray. As she grew into her womanhood, there were clouds where once were none. The storm that was her life was born, and would swirl about her till it was done. She sought refuge from the darkness that followed her through her life, and she found what she was looking for in a place where there is no strife. Now the storm that was is over. The skies are becoming pearl gray, and we're left to remember the light and the cruel storm that took it away. This is just a birthday thing that I wrote for my wife one time. I have a wonderful wife. We were married 56 years when she died 17 years ago. I have many good memories. And this is Happy Birthday, Margaret. Now you've had another one, and I know you'd rather not. But after all said and done, I still think you're really hot. We can't stop old Father Time. He's just going to have his way. So forget the others along the line and make this your happiest birthday. This is the first poem that I ever wrote that I remember. I used to live in a small town, and there was a man and woman named Ora and Maud Reed, and I loved them. And I wrote this poem. I called it Aunt Maud and Uncle Fred. I didn't like Ora for various reasons. I named Ora. And my intent was to let other people realize that they had people like this that they cared for. Aunt Maud and Uncle Fred. Do you remember Aunt Maud and Uncle Fred? Her hair was gray with a hint of forgotten red. His hair was gone, but what a jolly face. They were happy, quiet people with trouble not a trace. One Sunday after supper, the church bells softly rang. They walked to evening vespers and listened, prayed, and sang. Oh, you remember Aunt Maud and Uncle Fred? Though these many years they've mingled with the dead, they lived and loved and a gracious family reared, and through the years, though their lives had no enemy to be feared, only friends to be counted in their stead. You do remember Aunt Maud and Uncle Fred. You might remember them by another name, but the memories we share are just the same. The friendly home, the spoken words so softly said, we all remember Aunt Maud and Uncle Fred. This thing will come about as my brother and his wife and my wife, we were in Chicago and we went to some sort of a nightclub and they had some kind of stage stuff, and I wrote this poem as a result. It's called That Ain't Right. Dear Dan and Dee, where had you gone? You were here for such a little time. We laughed and joked and carried on, but now it seems it's really hard to smile. We planned to have you here for such a long, long time. Our days were filled with happiness so bright, but now you're gone. Only memories remain. That ain't right. And this is called Something Nice. And this is about Dee, my brother's wife, had an operation. And I wrote this for her. Now Dee, you've had an operation and might be feeling a little down. But that's not really the bad news. For there's an ugly rumor going round. It's supposed to be a secret, but I've heard it once or twice. They say when you find out about it, I might say something nice. Now ain't that a heck of a laugh? Why would I do such a silly thing? Everyone knows us Patrick boys wouldn't say nothing with a frilly ring. Just because you're something special, and we love you an awful lot, ain't no reason to go and ruin the only reputation a fella's got. But maybe just this once, I could say how much we care. And if you don't let it out, we'll keep you in our prayers. Amen and goodbye.